Welcome to your ultimate hill stop, power and policy, where power dynamics meet real-world consequences. Today, we're examining an unfolding energy crisis that could profoundly disrupt the foundation of North American energy security. For decades, Canada has been the United States' top supplier of crude oil, accounting for more than 60% of total U.S. oil imports. This relationship has long provided a buffer against global volatility, but today that alliance is under immense strain. Mounting trade tensions and political disagreements have prompted Canada to threaten a full suspension of crude oil exports to the U.S. A move that would send shockwaves through the economy. The consequences: skyrocketing gas prices, global oil market instability, and a scramble for alternatives in Washington. Let's explore the 7 key factors driving this potential energy standoff. At the heart of this crisis lies a contentious economic maneuver: US-imposed tariffs on Canadian exports. While not directly levied on crude oil as of this writing, tariffs have been placed on several Canadian goods under various trade disputes, particularly during recent rounds of negotiations and retaliations. The premise of these tariffs is to protect domestic industries, but they've complicated cross-border trade. American refineries, many of which are optimized for Canada's heavy crude, particularly Western Canadian Select, now face the rising costs of importing this essential resource. Even minor tariff threats or regulatory delays can destabilize this long-standing supply chain. In response, Canada has begun reassessing its export strategy, recognizing that a heavy reliance on the US may no longer be economically or politically sustainable. With emerging markets like China and India signaling interest, Canada sees an opportunity to diversify its energy clientele, especially with expanded capacity via pipelines like the Trans Mountain expansion. Canadian officials, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, have expressed strong opposition to US trade practices. While no official declaration to halt crude exports has been made, the threat of retaliation looms if tensions escalate. Canada has the infrastructure and emerging pipeline access, such as the Trans Mountain and potential LNG terminals, to reroute energy exports to Asian and European buyers. This shift would be a seismic change. US refineries, particularly in the Midwest and Gulf Coast, are heavily reliant on Canadian bitumen and heavy crude blends. Transitioning to lighter crudes or alternative sources, such as Venezuela or the Middle East, would not only be technically difficult, but also politically risky and cost-intensive. If Canada reduces or ceases exports to the US, energy independence for North America could fracture, ushering in a new era of global dependence and price volatility. Should Canada reduce or cut off oil exports, US gasoline prices could surge, potentially reaching $7 to $9 per gallon in some areas. While speculative, such spikes have precedent during the 2022 global fuel crisis following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Gasoline prices approached $5 per gallon nationally, and regional spikes were even higher. Such a shock would cascade through the economy. The trucking industry, already strained by diesel costs and supply chain issues, would face soaring operational expenses. This would result in higher prices for consumer goods, ranging from groceries to electronics. Airlines would also see jet fuel prices rise, increasing the cost of travel and shipping. Inflationary pressure would intensify, compounding the broader economic fallout. Even a temporary disruption in oil supply from Canada could create enduring financial uncertainty, with energy futures markets reacting sharply to supply constraints. A common suggestion is that the United States can simply ramp up its own oil production to fill the gap, but the reality is more complicated. Most US production, especially from the Permian Basin, consists of light, sweet crude, which differs significantly from Canada's heavy crude blends. Many American refineries are specifically configured to process heavy and sour crude, meaning retooling them for light oil would take years and billions of dollars. Additionally, US production is already near peak capacity, and expanding it would require regulatory approval, land access, labor and infrastructure development, none of which offer short-term relief. Turning to other suppliers such as OPEC or Venezuela also presents challenges. OPEC nations have a history of price manipulation and supply limitations, while Venezuela's oil industry is politically unstable and hampered by international sanctions. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, established in 1975 to buffer against energy crises, has been depleted to its lowest levels in over 4 decades. At its peak, the SPR held 727 million barrels. However, by late 2023, that number had dropped to roughly 350 to 390 million barrels, following record withdrawals in 2022 to stabilize domestic fuel prices. Although the Biden administration initiated a repurchase program to rebuild the SPR, replenishment has been slow and hampered by budget constraints and volatile oil prices. This leaves the US dangerously exposed in the event of a supply disruption. Whether from natural disasters, geopolitical conflict, or trade breakdowns, a depleted SPR not only undermines emergency preparedness but also weakens America's leverage in energy diplomacy. The US-Canada energy partnership isn't just a bilateral affair, it's a critical node in the global energy supply chain. If Canada halts oil exports to the US, global markets would immediately feel the pinch. Reduced supply from a G7 oil-producing nation would tighten inventories, potentially driving Brent crude prices above $100 per barrel again. Major importers like India and China would seize the opportunity to secure long-term deals with Canada. Rebalancing global energy alliances, financial markets would react, with oil futures and equity volatility surging, especially in energy-intensive sectors. This disruption could also undermine global efforts toward energy transition as nations rush to secure fossil fuel supplies instead of focusing on renewable alternatives. In short, a Canadian export shift would reshape the geopolitical energy map. With the US election year approaching, this crisis is becoming increasingly politicized. Lawmakers are sharply divided. Some advocate for a rollback of tariffs and diplomacy, arguing that the economic risks are too high. Others insist on maintaining a hardline approach, citing sovereignty and domestic industry protection. On Canada's side, the government faces its own pressures. A decision to cut oil exports would be unprecedented, yet it could be justified as a defensive trade measure. Domestic support for such a move is growing, particularly among energy advocates in Alberta and Saskatchewan, who see little gain from an increasingly adversarial US. If diplomatic channels fail, the consequences could be catastrophic. A full-blown trade war, rising inflation, and lasting damage to continental energy security. The United States and Canada now stand at a critical crossroads. Their energy partnership, once a symbol of continental cooperation, is cracking under the weight of economic nationalism, political division, and global realignment. Should the US maintain its current tariff stance, Canada may take irreversible steps that reshape global oil distribution and redefine alliances. The question now is not just about oil, it's about power, policy, and long-term vision. So what do you think? Should the US concede and prioritize energy security by restoring its alliance with Canada? Or should it hold firm and risk the consequences in a bid for economic self-reliance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to subscribe to Power and Policy for more updates on this evolving crisis, and for deeper dives into the intersection of energy, economics, and automotive innovation. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.